Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. Thank you for coming. Thank you for those words, Secretary Almendras. When he mentioned that some of them will not be next-gen anymore, I exclude myself from that. So thank you for the support, Secretary, President of MAP, and the rest of the governors of MAP. Thank you, Arnold, for making this possible. Okay, I will try to set the stage with these few minutes with a few words from my own background. I've been in two fields, technology and behavioral science. So I'm going to try to set the tone for this day based on those perspectives. This may look like your digital transformation. Everything is in line, everything is following in the right direction, the lights are on, but it's not moving. Now, as Rene said earlier, it's not a question of just technology. It is part of technology. Technology is part of it, but this is not just about technology. And that is why we named the conference Beyond Bytes and Budgets. Because usually when companies want to transform digitally, they have the money. That technology is there, but they get stuck. Right? So the missing piece that seems not to be paid attention enough is the piece of human capital. Now, in the few minutes I have, I will identify 3 problems, and I will drill down into 5 recommendations from a behavioral science point of view. The first one is about what I call loose links. So these are loose links between 3 items. First, the technology. Second, the key results. And third, behavioral change. So if you take any strategy, you're all familiar with scorecards. You have your key results. You identify your key performance indicators. If we do not tie our technology activities to those key results, you end up with misaligned priorities, wasted resources, etc. Then there's another step that sometimes gets failed to do, which is the step of linking the key results to behavior change. Take your scorecard. Everything on the scorecard in terms of measures of success will not happen without behavior. You need behavior change, whether it's change on the part of the customer, behavior change on the part of the employee. If you're running an LGU, it requires change on the part of the citizen. So there's always behavior change. But this is sometimes something we expect will just happen. So we just say, okay, these are our key results, bahala na kayo, right? So you need to map that link between technology, key results, and behavior change. The next item is a weak business case. So as business people and even in government, there's always this idea that we have to build a business case. And a big part of the business case are the financials. And sometimes there's this tendency to reduce it to just financials. And within there are certain things you cannot capture in financials. Now, some of them can be quantified. These things you see on the screen can also be quantified, but they're a little bit more difficult to quantify. So if you're talking about productivity gains, usually that's the main justification, or you say errors we avoid, bottlenecks we unclog, information that's made visible, resources that are freed up. All of this can be quantified. Sometimes people just don't know how to do it reliably, or just don't want to exert the effort to do so. So that's another problem. Okay. The other item is this part of a leap of faith. There comes to a point when you do the business case where you cannot expect to get absolute certainty. Like if you're doing, let's simplify it with a cost-benefit analysis, and you're looking for an NPV, you cannot come to a point where there's absolute certainty. So there are certain points, particularly with digitalization, where you have to make that leap. You either believe it's going to happen, you either believe that it's going to change your future or not. Then you have to make that leap. Now, of course, you have to do the homework, but again, there are times when you cannot quantify everything. This is like the idea of how important is mental availability in the purchase of a brand. Right? What comes to mind when you're looking for shoes? Well, Nike, Adidas, because it's mentally available, it's top of line. How do you quantify that? Well, you can interview people, get their preferences, but again, you won't get 100% certainty. So there's this element of a leap of faith. And then finally, this thing about perception. People need to perceive two things, that the digitalization is useful and it is easy to use. Now, we take this for granted. And you see this particularly in rank and file, manufacturing industry, supply chain companies. You'll be surprised at the level of Excel expertise they have when they're trying to optimize routes for the deliveries of 150 trucks on a daily basis. And they're doing this all in Excel. So there's this illusion of optimality that it's all optimal. Now, and the resistance is coming from the fact that they don't think that it's going to be useful enough that it's worth the change, or it's going to be easy enough to adapt. So these are some of the barriers we encounter as we go through this process of digitalization. Now, a behavioral approach to the problem is trying first to understand why do people behave in certain ways. And which brings me to the concept of thinking modes. Now, when we say thinking, the immediate thing comes to mind is what you go into when you think about 1847 times 6938, or building your forecasting model, or analyzing your funnel drop-off rates. That's what that normally comes to mind when we say thinking. But there's another kind of thinking mode that we go into, which is what you go into when you're doing 1 + 1, you're brushing your teeth, you're drinking from a glass of water, you woke up this morning, you got dressed, picked up your stuff, got a Grab, came to the hotel, looked for lunch. You're also thinking. And this thinking mode is automatic, fast, effortless, and uncontrolled, compared to the earlier thinking mode, which is deliberate, slow, effortful, and controlled. Now, because the orange part is easy, we spend most of our time there. We're lazy. Our mind is lazy. And it's only when we are asked, how's our funnel doing, we shift. And when we answer the question, when we're done with that, we go back to the orange side. Now, in the literature that's called System 1 and System 2, popularized by Daniel Kahneman, who's the Nobel Prize economics winner. He's a psychologist who happens to be the founder of behavioral economics. I rather call this, though, Donna and Anna. Anna for automatics, easier to remember. Donna is for deliberate. When we design behavior change programs, we typically think of, let's give people money. Let's give them the rules, they'll follow the rules. Who are you talking to? You're talking to Donna. Unfortunately, the person out there in the wild who's making these decisions is not deciding in a sanitized environment, devoid of any noise, seated at his desk. No, he's in the supermarket, he's trying to get a cab, he's walking to the office, he's going to the restaurant, he's walking through the halls of a government office trying to get his permits. So there are many other things that affect those decisions and those choices. And that context in which that person is influences the choice. So if you can actually affect the context or shape the context, you can shape or affect the decisions. Let me give you 3 examples. Cognitive biases. So these are mental tendencies that we automatically resort to. An example would be we are more receptive to information that supports a pre-existing belief versus information that contradicts what we already believe. If we're told that we're given information, it confirms what we believe, we're more readily to accept that, right? Something a little bit more subtle is what we call loss aversion. This is the tendency to dislike a loss more than to like the gain of the same size. In one of the pieces of work we did with a very large utility was to try whether we could change payment behavior without penalizing people, without threatening them with disconnections, but by taking the messaging, in this case SMS messages that were sent to them as payment reminders, and see if we can recompose the message to actually drive a behavior change. What was the behavior change we were looking for? We were trying to get them to pay earlier, not to pay late. So we tried several things. We ran this through what we call a randomized control experiment to check for causality, and we did this across 74,000 people. And what we found was this is what worked best. It says, from Breck, your business center manager, Mr. Eala, if you're paying your bill anyway, better to pay now than to suffer the pain of disconnection later. This moved days past due from 5 days to 4 days across 74,000 people with a highly statistical significant result. Loss aversion, where is loss aversion there? Loss aversion are in the red words. You are trying to make salient the fear of the loss. You can actually frame this as a gain, like enjoy your connection or whatever that product is, right? Here we're trying to frame it as the loss. Okay? So that's an example of a cognitive bias. We are not giving out money. We are not threatening disconnections. We are reframing the message to trigger a certain response mentally. Anchors. Last month, I was looking for a survey tool that can do randomized allocation of questions. SurveyMonkey is a popular one. I found one, a classmate of mine said, why don't you check out Lime's survey? So I went to their website and I found this. So apparently they're pushing 3 packages. The first package on the left is the expert package, which is $1,000 pesos a month. Then you have the business package, which is $2,700, and you have the corporate package, which is Colas. The green package, which is what they're actually pushing people to sell, is $1,000 a month. So the question is, from a behavioral science point of view, what can I do to make green or that package more palatable, more attractive? And this is what they did. They put in an anchor, the basic package. And what's interesting about this is look at the price. It's $1,199. You can go to limesurvey.org, you'll find that today. They're actually anchoring you on a higher number so that when you see the 1,000, it looks more valuable. Okay, and there are several other sites on this. The Economist has done this. They do this in pricing for coffee when they want you to upgrade to a larger size. So that's anchoring. And finally, social norms. So I took this from Getty Images 2 days ago. That's Ayala Avenue without cars, no traffic. Sunday, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., Eala Avenue is closed to runners. So if you're a runner and you see something like this, I love it. Now, what will make me love running more? If I see what other people are doing, which is that. You look out your window, Eala with a lot of people like that. There's this other thing on social norms, which is, I found this out 2 days ago from, who knows this? See, Labubu, right? I found this out like 2 days ago. I was talking to one of the people at work, and I said, what's going on? What example can I show in terms of social norms? She said, sir, look at Labubu. I said, what's that? Okay, then she sends me this, okay, and what do people do with that? And who buys that? Well, apparently college students, people who just graduated, people in their 30s, they buy this stuff, they put it on the back of their knapsack, different colors. It's not cheap, right? How can I make, if I'm Labubu, how can I make this look more interesting? You go to popmart.ph and you'll see this on the site. You'll see that. That's a social norm. Now you start thinking, ooh, am I missing out? I probably should get one of these Labubus, right? So, again, you influence the context in which people decide, you get a chance at influencing the behavior. Okay, I will wrap up with 5 behavioral science recommendations. First, again, in the context of digital transformation, alignment guidance. Help people get alignment between what they're doing on the transformation side with the key results. Do not stop there. Move to the behavior change. So these are the key results. What is the behavior change we need to execute? What's the kind of behavior change program we need to put in place so that the key results happen? Now, for many of us who have been in business or running organizations for years and years and years, like Secretary Almendras, who's very experienced in stuff like this, it's obvious, right? But it's not so obvious for many other people. So there's guidance that's needed so that they understand this digital transformation activity is connected to these key results, and the behavior change programs that have to happen are these. Second, templates. Cost-benefit templates. Be careful with leaving out non-financial information in the business case. Our brain craves for 1 + 1 = 2. That's what our brain craves for. And sometimes that blinds us to other things we have a difficulty trying to quantify. That doesn't mean it's not important. So help people with templates that will tell you these are the best practices. There was a time that pilots, I believe, had no checklists. Like surgeons, there was a time that surgeons had no checklist. They asked the surgeons, WHO asked the surgeons, so we're going to start putting checklists for you. The surgeons said, no, we're experts. We don't need that, right? Then they flipped it around. They asked the surgeons, imagine you were the patient. Would you want your surgeon to have a checklist? All of them said yes. So it's not about the expertise only. It's also about making it easy for the person to go through this process. Third, cheat sheets. Now, the reason why people perceive it not useful or not easy to use is because they cannot relate what they're doing with the actual benefit of the transformation. Right? They don't know because they don't know what they don't know. Right? So if you're able to provide these quick start and use case specific checklists of a particular feature set of your digital transformation, relating that to the work the person is trying to do, then it becomes a little bit more obvious that this is easy to use and useful. Don't take it for granted. Protocols. We launch a project for digital transformation, the system is live, and we say, just use it, right? And we forget about this feedback loop of iterative improvements that have to be put in place. And if people keep complaining, we just say, okay, they're stupid. We explain this to you, read the manual, and then we expect people to follow. No, it doesn't happen that way. And finally, social proof and messengers. You saw social norms earlier when you see people running in Eala or you see the Labubu thing. When people see the CTO or the CEO talking about digital transformation, and I'm a person, for instance, who is skeptical, who is not sure whether it's useful for me, there's always this, oh, he's saying that because he's the CTO, and that's his field. He says that because he's the CEO and he wants that to happen. But if it's somebody who's my peer from within the department or the next department that becomes a champion for the digital transformation and talks about the specific case that we used, and this is a good example for the LGUs, right? If the city of Parañaque starts becoming the messenger for the other LGUs, that this is working for us, that helps counter the cynicism, the skepticism. And that's the point about messengers and social norms. So to wrap up, let me summarize. First is provide guidance for mapping linkages among technology, key results, and behavior change. Second, offer templates for incorporating hard to quantify and qualitative benefits into the benefit story, the cost-benefit story. Third, release quick start use case-specific cheat sheets. Fourth, establish a protocol for iterative feedback and improvement. And number 5, if you want to take a picture, this is the picture, this is the slide you should take the picture of. Create social proof of usefulness, ease to use, and success with emphasis on the right messengers. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope I was able to set the tone for this afternoon. I wish you a good afternoon for the conference. Do not forget there's networking and there's cocktails later on, and I hope you all enjoyed the BS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eala.